Eric, welcome to the show, my friend. We got some very interesting things to talk about. The MLS calendar is there's a proposal to change it to go on the more European side instead of the traditional February to December calendar we're accustomed to.
It's going to be a crazy topic. I don't want people to get confused with a European calendar or the Mexican version of that calendar. They're very two different things. So understanding that going in, but all of this is comedy to me, man. It's funny. It's funny because we ran an entire presidency and a platform on this, the realities of what we tried to present to make soccer better and to have some collaboration between the United States Soccer Federation and MLS and the other existing teams or leagues, I should say, at that time, to try and make it just better for the players, better for the fans, better for everything, and especially on the business side. And we had 5 points that we presented to Major League Soccer and specifically to Don Garber. And it's just,
Hey, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure you give it a like down below. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell notification so you never miss any of my videos. I appreciate all the support. Now, back to the video.
it's just comedy to me that they basically championed all 5 of those ideas, and this being the last one to change the schedule. But the irony of that, I guess, is they've gone backwards. Changing the schedule was the first component of trying to make soccer easier, better, and more efficient in this country.
Why do you think that they have finally came to this, I guess, epiphany conclusion that this is the right thing to do? Why now? Like you said, when you talked to Don Garber several years ago and told him that this is something they should do, and he said it would never happen. What do you think is the changing? Why do you think they're changing their tune on this finally?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of pieces there. I mean, ideally the best time to have made the change would have been during the pandemic. It couldn't have been more ideal to just allow the extension of the delay as far as the season start, and to be able to start it up at an appropriate time, which may have worked. They did have essentially achieve that, putting everybody in a bubble. But that was to me the ideal time to do it. Now the reasons behind doing it are fairly obvious. We still are, one of the only leagues in the world that there's a few other smaller leagues, but that doesn't comply with any of the FIFA mandates, and the timing just doesn't line up. Now, some people might say, well, this is silly. It's functioning, it's fine. One argument would be to starting in bad weather and finishing in worse weather, the worst weather, is one. But I think that the Apple folks are the ones driving this. I don't know that, and I can't confirm that. But this new deal with Apple is realizing the magnitude of not getting the eyeballs that they wanted because they're up against football, the NFL, college football, the end of baseball when baseball is at its best, and the start of the NBA. You're finishing your season, and I made this argument till I was blue in the face that you really couldn't get the sponsorship dollars and or the TV deal you wanted because no one was watching. There was no way to back it up. There was no way to say, "Hey, we got this great product. Dump your money into it." And the realities is that it's so far much better to finish at a different time. And I think that the Apple folks are looking at the numbers, looking at the drop, and saying, why don't we change? It would make it far more easier for us to compete at a time when we really want eyeballs against the indoor games, who are finishing their seasons, as opposed to trying to go up against the monster of the NFL, the NBA start, and baseball in October. It's basically logic. I mean, no one really had that kind of foresight when the league was started in 1996. It was all about being different and trying to figure out how to expedite the process. If you go back to that, I mean, that's the other part of it. You had essentially a ton of owners who had no real soccer background saying, well, why don't we just do it the way the NFL does it? The season's over, and we keep things on a January 1 to December 31st schedule, and we just do what everything else. The way we do it in the NFL is we wait till college is done, we do a combine, we do a draft, and then we start the season with populating the league with a bunch of collegiate players. Which, to be fair, I mean that made sense time wise, but what we're doing now doesn't make sense. And it's just 4 months of guys sitting on their ass doing nothing, and then we get upset with the level of play when anybody that knows anything about the game knows that you cannot take that much time off in this profession. It's just not feasible. It's not possible. The value and the quality of the games will go down. The injuries will increase. And as we've grown as a soccer nation, I think not just the TV people, but people that are populating these coaching jobs are saying, why can't we do this differently? It would make my job a lot. Please stop, basically taking all of my players away in the middle of a summer window and then expecting me to figure it out. Alex Pineda, I mean, think about Pineda. Like, what is he thinking right now? He just lost all his best players, gets fired because he didn't have enough time or adequate time to figure out what the replacements were going to look like when they made some decisions to unload. So changing the schedule basically allows those kind of windows for us to take breaks when we need them for the health of our players, but also to engage in the business of football without putting some of our managers, GMs, and whatnot completely under the cloud of not being able to do anything. You can't recover quick enough.
Well, you and I are perfectly aligned in believing that this is a good move for the league, and I've been voicing this for many years as well. And hopefully, by the time this episode's over, we can put to rest some of people's doubts of why this shouldn't happen. But one of the things you hit on is talking about the competition with other sports, talking about the NFL, the NBA, NCAA football, and obviously hockey and baseball is going on right now. I can't tell you how many times I've had people counter me and say, Will, you can't do this because then you're going to compete with NFL and college football. And I'm just like, are you oblivious? Do you not realize that the most important part of your season is competing with the entire part of it is competing with NFL and NCAA football? And it just, like you said, it kills your advertisement. It kills interest. How many casual fans could you possibly get, Eric, that would watch a good playoff game with maybe a Messi versus and Miami versus a Columbus Crew and Cucho Hernandez, but Texas and Georgia's on number 1 versus number 5? It's tradition like that. We just haven't built that yet. They're gonna watch the college football game at night versus rather than watch the MLS playoff game. But if it was in May, like you're proposing, and it's a NBA playoff game that's like game 1, not a big deal, or a hockey game, they're not only going to probably watch it, but be more inclined to go to the game because, like you said, the weather is going to be better. People want to go outside in May.
Well, we've learned that like this generating some sort of or manufacturing some sort of nostalgic value and people freezing their asses off drinking hot chocolate in a really important game where the field is almost frozen over or we're shoveling snow. That works in the NFL. That's great. That's what they do. But they're actually smart enough to finish their season in February and put it somewhere where the weather will cooperate. Now, the other part of that, really, if going backwards, I mean, it's not just the TV people understanding that, but I'd like to see people watching a final with their shirts off, drinking a beer. I don't know about you, but I think that's kind of the way I would want to watch a big event, and let football have that look at this is this the ice bowl or whatever, and we were watching Brady, did his arm come forward? Did it not? Who knows? You couldn't see anyway. It's snowing. And we have to watch the replay. And then we say, oh, what a great football game that was. Okay, the throw ball is what I call it. It doesn't really have the ball on the floor, and it's a little bit more difficult to play the game that we love in those conditions. And I certainly think the fans would enjoy that more. There's so much data behind this too that proves that playing through the summer, right? It has to be a big event. They know that. They know, they have this information. They know that, and this is pretty much why they tried to create the Leagues Cup, is because it creates an event or a friendly, if you will, of bigger names and a reason to attend these games, because we were coming to the conclusion that they couldn't sell tickets to games in the summer. The drop off was so significant. And if you really do the deep dive and all the people who have season tickets, but they give them to somebody else because they're on vacation, they're actually enjoying the summer. The data will prove to you that the numbers start going up when the kids go back to school. That's a fact, and we're seeing that now. Does the weather get a little bit colder? Yeah, it's a little bit colder. But the reason why people go back to their soccer schedules, because they've gone on vacation or they want to do other things. If you make soccer an option for the California people who can either go to the beach or go to Disneyland or go somewhere else, go fishing, go camping, or they can do a lot of things as a family, it's not really a treat, is it? It's just one of the 7 options that you have if you live in Southern California. I realized that, as a California resident for all those years. If the summer is off, right, and we're giving our players adequate rest, and you can have these events, use the events as a sell job to the start of your season. The summer should be the preseason games where you bring over the big names of Manchester City or Arsenal or Chelsea or Manchester United and AC Milan, Inter Milan, Real Madrid, Barcelona. Bring them over. Bring them over. Let's play. And then you have a captive audience that you can actually hand out the pamphlets that say, hey, our season starts in a couple of weeks. Maybe you want to come. And most of the people that watch those kind of games say, hey, this is kind of cool. I want to be a part of this. When does it start? August, September? Great. That makes sense to me. And the part about making sense and watching the league try to go backwards now and try and figure out how they're going to I guess get people to watch Leagues Cup, to get people to participate, to get people to go to games. They realize that there's a lot of tripwire there when you're trying to sell tickets to people who don't really look at that soccer game as the number one option. They certainly did when MLS was occupying those months. But it's just as a conundrum that has an easy fix and it's an easy solution. And when people understand that, and they understand that, and some of these owners understand it, and they realize that that they're going to make more money if people are more accessible, I think they'll eventually come around to it. But to keep in mind, and this is going to sound like somewhat of a conspiracy theorist, but I've been in the rooms, man. I've been in the rooms when the league started. This league was founded by the NFL people who saw a World Cup happen in 1994 and said, how do we get control of this? It wasn't about necessarily being excited about soccer, just recognizing this sleeping giant is coming. We better figure out a way to keep it under our thumb. And yeah, I'm Robert Kraft. You're smart. You're a good businessman. That's why you did it. But it's no different than Arthur Blanc trying to figure it out now. It's no different. It's the same people who will always say, look, I love this thing. I'll put some money into it, but I want to control it. Not because I'm not into it. I still have my, if I'm, Clark Hunt, I'm not really as invested as I'd like you to believe, because man, I'm the owner of the Kansas City Chiefs, and I don't want to mess that up. I can't afford to mess that up. Yeah, I'll have time for you once the season is over, but by the way, are we in the playoffs? I have been on a team. I won't throw that owner under the bus. I was at dinner with one of my teammates, and the owner of the team walked up and said, "Hey guys, how you doing? Great job last week. Hey, you guys, I got some extra tickets to the U2 concert. You guys want to go?" And we're like, "Yeah, when is it?" And he's like, "Yeah, so it's Saturday." And we're like, we've got a game. Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Ah, it's too bad. And you're like,
Wow.
you're kind of like, okay, what was that? Right? That's kind of this attitude that I've come to realize, and I might be sounding like I'm screaming at the rain, is that soccer is still controlled by the wrong people. and the wrong people are still making decisions to keep it under the NFL's thumb. That's what's happening, folks. Whether you want to believe it or not, call me crazy. I really don't care. I'm at an age now where I would rather see this sport get better before I die than continue to be a muted voice.
Yeah, I agree completely. And that's why I'm honestly shocked because the MLS feels like they're always a day late and a dollar short. They're always the last one to come to these realizations of something that could be beneficial to the league. So I was honestly surprised to see that report last week that they are going to do something. And I agree with what you said earlier. COVID would have been the perfect time to do this because no matter what, there's going to be an awkward period for probably a year. You're going to have to either play a half season or go on a delay because, they start their season in February and this proposal would start the season in August. So there's going to be some type of awkward period. But Eric, I believe the best time is 2026. And I think that's why they're getting smart to it because like you said about like handing pamphlets and saying, hey, listen, here's this league, come check it out. After the 2026 World Cup, which is being hosted here, which is a big event, you're going to be able to say, hey, did you enjoy what you watched? Well, guess what? Our season's actually starting after this. Come check it out and see, support your local club. And I think that the way that it's structured right now, there's always a high at the beginning of the season. People are excited for the season start. They're ready to support their team. And then it dies off pretty quickly. It really does. I mean, I covered the league. I've been covering the league for years, and I just see it. The energy dies down. Wouldn't you rather the energy die down, maybe during the NFL season because it's already going to be hard anyways? And then
that's exactly what you do, is because these games of relevance that are being played are really unfair to some of these. We just had a playoff game not canceled, moved back to another venue because they had scheduled Supercross. Yeah, that was kind of a bad one. But if you're going to play these games, right, and what I'd hope is that we want our players to be on the best possible track to showcase themselves. There's a lot of players that when you really engage into the into the world football business, and coming over here in May and watching the best teams in Major League Soccer battle it out in situations where the weather is completely cooperating, and you crown a champion and you're not getting. We started this season. Remember, the start of this whole damn thing in a monsoon up in Boston. That's because Robert Kraft wanted the payoff of putting a couple of bucks into this league, so he wanted a final in the absolute worst place to play a final weather-wise in the history of forever. But he didn't care. He basically tried to, and we've turned that into you remember that when it was like you couldn't even pass the ball and Echeverria had to slam at the back post and Tony Sennett was amazing and he scored a great goal, and the other goal, like, how could you judge that? But DC's our champions, and Alexi Lawless sang the national anthem with his guitar in the rain. Cool. I mean, look, I play those games, which will be a part of accumulating points, just like everywhere else. That's the grind. Baseball has the dog days of summer. We can have a version of that if you like, but at least let's put our showcase games, our playoffs, in a spot where people can watch it. Sponsors will get involved with it. The marketing of it would be far easier, and we are allowing, at least a break after it's over for our players to adequately rest and recharge their batteries before they start again. And we can't do it in a 4-month sling. So your point's valid. When does this actually happen? Is it going to require somewhat of a shutdown? Playing a half season, we've done so many weird things. Who would care if we played like a small version of something, like, and then an extended version? So I mean, our guys got to play games, and we can't just shut it down. Which is why the pandemic would have been or COVID would have been a really good opportune time to do it. But there's going to be players that are going to be expected to play in a World Cup competition because there's more teams than ever in this next World Cup who will be playing in our league, and we have to facilitate that. We have an obligation to those players to give them a high level of competition so that they can adequately prepare. I mean, that's another point. I mean, I think you and I have talked about this in the past. And anybody knows this, if you're playing a World Cup in the summer and you are MLS player, look at the injury rate of the players who play in Major League Soccer who try to play in a World Cup. Look at the injury rate of the injuries that incur even prior to the competition. Because anybody that knows anything about Major League Soccer and playing in it, and if you're on a World Cup roster, is that first couple of months you are playing not to get hurt. You are so afraid that if you extend yourself, that you might pull something or tear something and then not be available to play in your dream of a World Cup. And then what happens is you go into training camp and you're expected to go bring it back up to a 95 exertion rate and you get hurt. They all do. Just go back and look at it. It's quite horrific, and a lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, a lot of players have an issue, and teams treat the first half of Major League Soccer like it's a preseason, and that's kind of like what you're alluding to. They do. They treat it like it's, hey, we'll just wait.
You don't have that option in Europe. Well,
No, you don't. It's do or die every day, right? There's always a demand.
You can't go to your club and say, hey, I'm going to be playing in a World Cup, and man, I really don't want to get hurt. They said, well, we don't want to get relegated, so we need you to bring it. If you're not willing to bring it, then you're not playing. We'll play somebody else. And then, that mentality, that attitude, that push and pull, all of that stuff, it all factors in. And all it equates to is having mediocrity. And our players.
One thing we have to address, because people are going to be coming at us in the comment section if we don't address this, is the weather. Now, the proposal is to take a break halfway through December, all of January, which, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Bundesliga takes a similar break because the weather's very bad in Germany.
Look at the map. We are not the kind of league that has ever married themselves to a home and away. We've never done that. So if you look at the map and you say, all right, well, how many franchises do we now have that can entertain the idea of playing in January? Think about that. You have a ton of places on the West Coast now, right? And I would even say San Jose can possibly pull that off. Maybe Portland's a stretch. Maybe Denver's a stretch, but I'm telling you, every team in Texas and every team in Florida, and there's a bunch now, and Atlanta, could facilitate these kind of games. It's going to be playable. So maybe you backloaded your schedule in the first 3 weeks of your season. If you are in New York, if you are a Boston or a New England, you're going to be playing away games. I mean, honestly, and I know this for a fact, there is an East Coast team right now that's entertaining the idea of moving the franchise. They are going to move the franchise because they are recognizing that the weather is getting in the way and this change is happening. So I applaud that, and I can't reveal who it is. You can probably figure it out, but I think the league is trending in the direction of facilitating a couple of things: the business of football, which without absolutely handicapping your coaches and your GMs who can't replenish the team after you've just lost your players. I already said this, but Atlanta's a pretty perfect example of that. Engaging with the sponsors who will be far more interested in dumping some of their dollars into soccer, because the numbers will be there, the audiences will be there, and they're not in competition with the NFL and college football and baseball, because that's where all the sponsorship dollars are going right now.
What do you say to the fan who says, and I got this a lot. Now, I think this is a minority. I think most of the people would agree with you and I that this needs to happen, but there are a couple of those fans in Kansas City, Minnesota, Montreal who are saying, if you do this, I will cancel my season tickets. What do you say to that?
I think that you'll be replaced pretty quickly. That's what I think. And maybe if they could, be a little bit more honest with themselves, because of their location, sometimes the summer stuff works for them. There's just too much pushback in all of the other venues. Like it's just not making sense anymore. But I do think, given an opportunity to convince a whole new crop of people that this is a better way of doing things, and those folks who have just witnessed a summer of, whether it's a World Cup or a bunch of exhibition matches, which have been a really good showcase for the excitement of what this sport provides, I think those people will be far more interested in engaging. But when they really, if you ever talk to a real season ticket holder, they will say, I can't want to get into postseason, and then the conflicts that they have if they are in a real NFL town are ridiculous. They are. It's actually more expensive, and it's a huge problem for some of them, because it's kind of hard to be a multi-sport season ticket holder when you are essentially looking at games that are happening on the same day or the same part of the season, and they're important games. This is the playoffs. This is what you waited all year for. I mean, what do you do when they try to figure out, even if it's, let's say it's NYCFC playing back to back with the Jets, back to back with the Giants. Are you just going to go to event after event? You're going to go Saturday, Sunday? Is that what you're going to do? Or would you rather have a more of a spotlight put on the MLS playoff game played in a time, maybe it's May, maybe it's June, but that sounds far more enjoyable than freezing my ass off.
Well, 100%. And also, too, statistically, Eric, it's more dangerous to play in the Texas heat than it is to play in the cold in Minnesota. It is. Like, look, I understand that there's frostbite concerns, but I think it's a lot easier to warm yourself up than it is to cool yourself down in those hot summer days. And you've seen people drop dead from heat strokes. There's been several cases of that happening. And honestly, as a fan, I would rather be bundled up in cold weather than be sweating my ass off and just feel like I'm dying of heat. Getting it, look at me, I'm fair skinned. I'll get burned alive, man. I'll catch on fire in the stands. But I just think
guys on the field, they don't want to play in 104 and they don't want to play in 34. So the only way to achieve this is to actually figure out a way to make it 74, 80, which is a pretty enjoyable day. And the game really matters. It's the playoffs. It's your final, and it's not played in the snow. I go back. I mean, Colorado won this thing once, right? They won it with Gary Smith. I remember watching
2010. Yeah.
Up in Toronto, right? And look at the horrific injury that the forward got from Dallas. That only happens because of the circumstances, and I don't think that kid ever played again. But his knee just went completely backwards. But it was just it's just not what we need. If we're really, let's say if we finally do get somebody on the hook and they really want to watch an MLS game and they want to see the playoffs, and the game itself isn't the best version of what we're trying to present. It just isn't. We can't do that in December in the snow. We can do that in May. We can't do that in December. And players would certainly, not just barring injury, they're taking all of those things into consideration. I think the majority of the players would love to see, some of these games played at a different time and time of the season. And I'll go back to it, being someone who was pushed to my limits and had to retire far too early because I played too many goddamn games. These players are being stretched too far. They need those adequate breaks over the summer. They don't need to jump right into another tournament. That's half of those guys that I've talked to them have said, man, we're trying to get ourselves knocked out of this thing so we can get a break. People don't like to hear that, but that's what's happening. So when you wonder why your team played poorly, they're not all the way invested into playing at 103 degrees against Club America. With 18,000 people in the stands and as you said, risking death out there and injury. And I quit when I was 31 and a half to 32 years old because I played too many games, and it was too much for me to go from Germany to now play straight through the summer. We played a game, I think it was 110 in an Open Cup game against Chicago in Dallas. I have no idea why we did that. And we went to 0-0, went to overtime. Man, I don't think some of our guys never recovered from that game. I certainly didn't. I mean, I was dead. It was horrible. It just isn't the way that the game needs to be showcased. If they want to make this an entertainment sport, great. Let us entertain. We can't entertain in the snow.
Well, final point before we end the show or this episode. I think this is a big thing too that we haven't talked about yet. The Champions League. We have historically gotten our asses kicked by Liga MX, not maybe for a while because the talent disparity was too much. But lately, it's been more because we're playing pretty much in our preseason. And we talked about how the quality and the form we're in the first half of the year, while they're at the back end of their season, they're in full form. Now, you can make the argument they might be a little more tired or fatigued, but they're definitely in form. They're like about to hit their summer break. And that puts you to disadvantage. You know, that especially back in the day when the talent disparity was significant. If we go to a similar schedule, I believe that MLS, keep in mind, I'm not chasing Liga MX. I think we need to have bigger aspirations than being better than our Southern partner. But if we do this, I think you will see more MLS teams lift that CONCACAF Champions Cup trophy.
Without a doubt. And I mean, this also goes, back to the realities of the start of the season, players that are going to, in a World Cup year, trying to keep themselves healthy. And they certainly don't want to right out of the gates, and they haven't had more than a week to train, and they've been out for 3 months or off for 3 months, simulating practices, trying to work out, trying to stay healthy. But if you don't keep yourself in those rhythms, it's impossible to compete. It really is. I mean, you can go way back to 89, 90. I played for the San Francisco Bay Blackhawks before Major League Soccer. And we had a stacked team because of the way that our season ran. This is guys like, you wouldn't remember some of these names, or maybe you would. I mean, Dom Kinnear was a wonderful soccer player, by the way. We had a guy named Townsend Kin, who was the forward for China. Danny Pena was on that team. Marcelo Balboa, Troy Dyack, John Doyle, myself, Peter Isaacs, the Jamaican international, Paul Holliker, Paul Bravo. We had a stacked team, and we went toe to toe with Club America. So that's because we were actually in a rhythm where our fitness was actually there, and we were able to play with them. Everything changed when DC had a couple of good games, a couple of, I think they've won this thing in the early or late 90s, but for the most part, your point's valid. It's impossible to compete when you're just not fit enough to play with them. Doesn't mean they're better. And certainly you take the advantages of playing at altitude, and you factor that in. It's virtually impossible to win those games, and that's me putting my hand up, guy that threw up on the field at Azteca. It's not easy to play there, man, especially in the summer. We lost in the Gold Cup final 4-0 because we couldn't breathe. We couldn't breathe. We had our redemption when we took them to DC in a different time, not as hot, but no altitude, and we killed them 4-0. People forget that, but you can play when the conditions provide you that opportunity. Right now, if this change happens, well, it's going to get a lot better, and I really hope that that logic prevails here, and people really look at the realities and the pluses and the minuses, regardless of what a couple of people in Kansas City, Montreal, and Minnesota. Sorry, guys, it's time for you to catch up.
I agree. That's been my message, is just accept it, deal with it, and move forward, and just accept it as the new norm. Eric, listen, I appreciate you coming on. This was an interesting topic about the calendar. Hopefully we persuaded some people on the fence, or maybe even some doubters, and they're accepting that this is really probably gonna happen, and it's a good change for the league. So I appreciate your time, my friend. Until next time, guys, I will see you all soon.